Hello and welcome. My name is Ken Hubacher from EntityWise, and I would like to show you the MDM Introspector utility, a utility that will assist in debugging data issues on the Initiate MDM and Infosphere Standard Edition platforms. This utility can work on any of the Initiate MDM versions, as well as the IBM Infosphere Standard Edition versions. The purpose of this utility came from my own experience over years of doing implementations. As you know, during implementations, you rely heavily on SQL to help you understand the different aspects, issues, or problems you may have with member or entity data. From issues as simple as did the member get created successfully, to what entity does this member belong to what does the composite view for this entity look like. All of these are typically done through a series of SQL calls. None of these are difficult, but they become tedious as any single question usually results in multiple SQL statements to get to the bottom of the issue. So the goal was to make it very easy to start up the utility and point it at any MDM version and begin looking at member, entity, and all the supporting information. So as you can see, the target audience is experienced MDM implementers or very experienced users. So let's take a look at its capabilities. You will notice the utility has several tabs across the top. The Analysis tab is the main tab and is the owner of most of the functionality for this utility. Here you can access member entity data in a variety of ways, through a memIDnum and its source, through a memrecno, or through an entity ID, also known as an entrecno. To access it through a memIDnum, you would choose its source, a memIDnum, and hit retrieve. Down below you'll see the different rows that are returned from the MDM server. The first row you can see is memhead. You also get a compd string for that particular record, as well as all the different attribute values. The thing to point out is in the data column for the attribute values, you'll see that it's an XML representative of the fields. The purpose for this is so that the MDM utility doesn't have to have any predefined knowledge of the data model that it's accessing. That way this MDM utility can be pointed at any MDM server regardless and get any of the data that it has. Similarly, you can choose to not return some of this data. For instance, if I don't want to see memcompd, I can just unselect it and re-retrieve it, and now you'll see memcompd is gone. So you can filter out things that are not necessary for you. You can also access data through a memrecno. Choose the type, choose a memrecno, hit retrieve. You'll see that it comes back similarly. You can access it via get as entity here, and I can actually retrieve the entire entity. You have to choose the entity type. And now it pulls back all of the member records for that entity. So member 4 was an entity 104. You can also get the entity ID. So again, if we'll go ahead and just choose 104 again and retrieve, and it's the same entity. Also, one of the things you can do is get the time instead of the odd recno. If I check this, the cod recno, mod recno values will actually be turned into a time value that's retrieved from odd head. So if I do that, I can actually now see the actual time values instead of just the odd recno numbers. And I can also choose an MCA or EMCA view if you have one. Here I just returned, and now you can see that I'm getting only the EMCA view of that particular entity. You can also do a mem compare, similar to the workbench or command line versions. Here you would choose a memrecno, the first memrecno and the second memrecno you want to compare to, and compare the memrecnos, and on this side you'll see the comparison information, just like Workbench or the command line utility. The connection tab is where you define the coordinates for the MDM and for the database. For the MDM, you would define the server, its port, its user and password, and optionally whether you're using an SSL connection or not. For the database, these coordinates are toward the MDM database itself. This is optional. If you do not wish to define this, most of the functionality will still work. Some of the statistics on the following tab will not render without this configured. The connection information is using the initiate/infosphere JDBC jars to make the connection. So you would define the JDBC URL, its JDBC class, and then the user, password, and database name of the database itself. The statistics page will return information about the current state of the MDM. You get the stats, and this will return in the first section. These are the 24-hour stats, and this is an indication of the activity that's going on with the MDM. Number of mem puts, mem gets, mem searches, etc. The task pane below will be the overall information, again, of the current state of the MDM. Here you can see the number of members, number of member tasks, number of entities, and number of entity tasks. And that concludes the introduction to the Introspector utility. I hope you find this utility helpful. If you wish to get a copy, please email me at khubacher@entitywise.com and I'll be happy to send you one. We hope to have additional features added along the way, so please be sure to check back in from time to time. I welcome any and all comments and suggestions, including any errors that you may find. Please don't hesitate to contact me. Thanks again.